Huffman. She is the mother of LAPD police officer Houston Tipping. Houston was a dedicated police officer who was in training on May 26th and died as a result of injuries from that training on May 29th. The purpose of this press conference here today is to help to provide additional information that we have uncovered since that time. One of the items that we have recovered is that there was reportedly an incident report taken by Officer Houston Tipping of a sexual assault, including of an object placed into the woman's private areas. According to the investigation carried out so far, the individuals responsible for that alleged sexual assault were supposedly LAPD officers. Even more shocking, our investigation has uncovered claims that one of the officers accused of sexual assault was at the training where Officer Houston Tipping eventually died and was killed. And this is very shocking news. But here's what we can confirm. We have a witness that claims that this occurred. We have documents that show that this occurred. And we also know from his family that Officer Tipping, after spending a few years happy at LAPD, following these events, was searching for a job outside of the LAPD. He did not want to say why, but he clearly was distraught over something. And that something appears to be these allegations of an LAPD officer engaged in a criminal act. We know that he did some investigation of that criminal act, and we know that he was killed within less than a year of that investigation. We also have one report indicating that the officer that was accused of this wrongdoing was at this training. So let's talk about that training for a moment and the injuries that we know that Officer Houston Tipping had. First and foremost, this was supposed to be bicycle training, helping officers to know how to handle situations where there is a group setting. What that training does not consist of is the so-called grappling exercise that the LAPD claims occurred. That wasn't an authorized active training. The training is supposed to have a trained supervisor conducting the training. There was none here. There's supposed to be heavy matting on the floor. These mats are supposed to be down so that officers in the training will not get injured if they fall onto the ground. Yet in this case, there appears to have been missing matting and protective devices. When officers go through training typically for LAPD or any law enforcement agency where there's going to be any kind of impact to their body, they're supposed to wear what is known as the red man suit. A red man suit is sort of protective armor. It has padding to it, but it protects officers from injuries. Inexplicably, in this case, Officer Tipping had serious injuries throughout his body. What did he have? He had 3 broken ribs. He had a lacerated liver. His heart eventually stopped working because of his injuries. He had a broken neck at C4. They believe that it went between C3 and C4. These are the cervical spines in the back of your neck. He was paralyzed. He became a quadriplegic. He had head injuries. Those head injuries in one place required 6 staples. It was a laceration. He had head injuries to the left side of his head. He had head injuries to the right side of his head. He had subdermal hematomas in 3 places on the right side and 3 places on the left side, according to the medical records. That's 6 different locations. There is no way grappling would have caused those kinds of injuries the way the LAPD portrays it. What would cause those injuries is if somebody picked a person up, slams them down onto their head and their neck onto a hard surface. Yet that would only account for the head injuries and the neck injuries. The injuries to the ribs and the liver are not easily explained. You have probably seen a coroner's report. The coroner's report claims that a Lucas device caused injuries to the ribs and to the liver as a possibility. Except the problem with that is that other medical reports show the Lucas device was never used. The Lucas device is a mechanical instrument to help with CPR or resuscitation. So what do you have? You have information that indicates that there was an intentional act causing injuries to our client, resulting in his death, that appears to be covered up for code of silence. And these are items that I'm going to be very interested tomorrow to see if they were addressed at all when the police department addresses the police commission. I doubt they will be. So I'm here to take questions, and then I will also show to you a couple of training videos that Houston's mom had. And the reason why that's important is we have requested production of training records, of the training videos, and other items. LAPD claims that there was no video taken of the training this day. We don't believe that's accurate. One of the reasons we don't believe that's accurate is because there is a practice of filming these events because that's how people get trained. Also, we don't believe it's accurate because we have videos showing that at other times people were trained. And also, the location of this was at the police academy, which has surveillance cameras all over the place. So I will show you a couple of videos after questions that you can see Houston twice when he was doing bicycle training, having a great time, and also once when he went through taser training, and that was in the academy. It shows exactly what we're saying, that they should have had videos, and why is it not being produced? I think the answer is obvious. It's going to be bad film.
So Fred, you bring up this sexual assault investigation. Why bring that up? Why bring that up? And secondly, you said you had documentation of the investigation. What are we talking about here?
Okay, as far as why do we bring that up? Because it is so outrageous to believe that an LAPD police officer would intentionally cause harm to another LAPD police officer. You have to understand, why would they do that? Where is the motivation? So when you have information that the motivation comes from an alleged sexual assault that's being investigated by Officer Tipping, now you understand why. You have a situation where officers are going to be interested in at least scaring Officer Tipping to prevent him from carrying out this investigation where they could get prosecuted criminally and or lose their jobs. So that's why it's relevant. It explains the motive as to why something would happen.
So you're saying several officers attacked Officer Tipping because he was investigating a sexual assault involving multiple police officers?
We know at least one officer attacked Officer Tipping. We don't know how many. We also know that Officer Tipping was involved in taking a report of a claim of a sexual assault, because I had seen that report. We also know that the victim from that report claims that there were 4 police officers that were involved in a rape of her.
Yeah, can you give us any more details on that, on the assault investigation and what took place?
We have the witness statement from the victim that corroborates the claims under penalty of perjury. And we have the report showing that it was taken by Officer Tipping. We have the name that the witness gave of one of the 4 assaulters appears to be the same name as one of the individuals that was at the training, and that is still being further corroborated.
Is this a report that the LAPD has?
The LAPD has a report, but when I asked for copies of reports, which would include that, On a Public Records Act request, they do not provide any documents, but I still have seen a copy because the victim had a copy.
Are you effectively, accusing these officers at this training of murder?
I think murder is what occurred. I'm accusing these officers of using intentional force, which then resulted in a tragedy.
Was Officer Tipping wearing a red man suit?
I do not know.
You do not know, you don't have that information.
You said
Brad,
that,
it just seems to me that you're starting with a presumption for criminal investigation. And then between that and the time that this training accident happened, there was enough of an effort by other officers who were named in here that they said, we're going to get this guy.
I think that the opportunity presented itself to try and put fear into Officer Tipping and to shut him up.
You're alleging a conspiracy by police officers to either scare away another officer from an investigation or recanting on what he told investigators, or if he doesn't do that, we're going to take this guy out.
I'm certainly alleging that at least one officer engaged in a use of force in order to try and scare or harm Officer Tipping in order to prevent him from further investigating a claim of rape.
During this training accident, do you have confirmation that that officer who is part of that investigation was the one grappling with Tipping, doing these things to him at that point?
We do have some witnesses that indicate a correlation, and we're still investigating that further.
Let's drop the correlation. I'm asking a direct question. Are you saying this officer who was accused by Tipping in that investigation was the one who actually was involved in grappling with him, inflicting the injuries that would have caused his death? Yes
Saying
or
that
no?
our investigation indicates that yes, it was.
And again, they're basically putting it together, this is conspiracy to commit murder.
May not be conspiracy, it may only have been one person, but certainly it was an act that resulted in death.
So you're not alleging multiple officers attacked him, but one specific officer?
I know one specific officer attacked him. Whether others did, I don't know yet.
And are you hoping that whatever video or whatever else might be there might show actions consistent with what the injuries that Officer Tipping have? More than just, if he was, you're indicating here, he was pile driven or slammed, so that his back and neck and he had a neck fracture. But broken ribs, things like that, and everything else like that, is that a training accident, or is that to the efforts to resuscitate him?
A picture is worth 1,000 words. A video helps to eliminate issues and questions. The people that have that evidence, the power to produce stronger evidence, would be the police department. They have failed to provide us with that. So what we go with is what we do know. We know objectively that Officer Houston Tipping had multiple head injuries. We know objectively he had broken neck in multiple places. We know objectively that he became a quadriplegic. We know that his heart stopped functioning. We know that his liver was damaged. We know that his ribs were broken in 3 places. That is not grappling. That is not a training exercise. That is a beatdown. And that is the kind of force and impact that knowingly can cause death.
Were paramedics involved in trying to resuscitate Houston Tipping after his heart stopped?
Definitely.
Well, as part of that, CPR, compression, things like that, might that explain the broken ribs, the laceration?
CPR could certainly explain broken ribs, not really the liver laceration.
Depends
But
on
as
whether
to
the
that,
ribs are broken.
it's ribs at 4, 5, and 6, so not quite where the liver is. But the coroner did not indicate that the broken ribs came from CPR. The coroner said that it would be consistent with the use of a Lucas device, and a Lucas device, according to the records, was not deployed, which indicates that's not the cause of it.
Brad, have you deposed the paramedics?
Have not done any depositions yet, but we do have statements that we've obtained from various sources of witnesses.
what other records are you talking about that would have said that you used a Lucas device?
There are medical records that we have, and so the medical records indicate that a Lucas device was not employed, notwithstanding the fact that in the coroner's report, the coroner says that a Lucas device might be the cause of broken ribs might be the cause of liver perforation.
Again, though, can you give us more information on this alleged sexual assault by LAPD officers? How many officers again were involved? When did this happen? What are the details behind it?
The allegation is that in July of 2021, 4 police officers were involved in a sexual assault of a woman in the Los Angeles area. A report was taken by Officer Tipping, and I've seen that report. And that report indicates that there was a sexual attack, and it indicates that an object was placed into the sexual organ of the female victim. And the female victim claimed that she was raped by 4 different people, all LAPD officers. She knew the names of some of those officers because they were in uniform and they had their name tags on. And that name of one of those officers with the name tag seems to correlate with one of the officers that was at the bicycle training.
And you're alleging that that officer is the one who hurt Houston Tipping.
Correct.
But you're not confirming or alleging that there might have been other officers who jumped in.
I cannot allege that because I don't have enough facts to say that one way or another yet.
Why the 10-month space between the time the crime allegedly happened and the attack on Houston Tipping?
Opportunity and investigation and learning of knowledge. I don't think that the officer was aware in July of 2021 that the woman came forward and reported this. I think that the officers were very brazen. They thought they were above the law, but no one's above the law. And I suspect that what happened is sometime shortly before the bicycle training, the officer learned about it, signed up for the training, he had the opportunity, and he did it. And I'm not convinced that that officer really meant to kill Houston. I think he was probably hoping to scare, and it just got out of hand.
But what about the story here though? Because nobody has painted this picture that was there. So are you saying that it's just being covered up by people who were there?
Well, I'm sure these actions are being covered up. The thought of a code of silence or a cover-up by a police department should not be shocking or surprising to anyone. You go back to the CRISPR Commission, you can go back to Serpico, you can go back to any number of cases and investigations, the Holtz Commission, all kinds of times when we have seen cover-ups of wrongdoing by the police.
But with due respect, I mean, if there's a case number and there's a case, has it gone to the DA's office? I mean, has this case been adjudicated? Has it moved forward other than this report that was taken down?
There was a case number, there was a case, there is a report. What the LAPD did with it afterwards, I don't know. LAPD claims in Public Records Act request that there was no incident report at all, but I have one.
So you have a copy of that report. Are you willing to share that at some
What
point?
about the case number? Can you give us a case number?
Can't.
Could you provide us a copy of the next request, the CPRA that you made?
That I can,
Where's the information from inside the training coming from, that there were no pads, and that there wasn't a supervisor? Can you explain, who that's coming from?
sure. There is a joke that sometimes they say in police departments, what's the fastest means of communication between the telephone, the telegraph, and the telecom? So when things happen, the information spreads like wildfire. And I've represented hundreds of police officers in my career. I've represented many, many LAPD officers in my career, more than 200 just from LAPD. I know a lot of people. They hear things and they report it. And I'm a lawyer. I put things together. This has taken a while to be able to put together all the pieces and to see this correlation. I don't make these claims lightly. I don't make them easily. I don't make them until I'm satisfied that I can prove what I said.
But to be clear, you haven't spoken to any of the paramedics to explain why the injuries are what they are?
I have the paramedics record. I've not spoken to a paramedic per se. I have called a number of folks who have told me, including police officers, that they cannot speak to me because they have been told not to speak to me. They've been told that they need a lawyer and they want a lawyer present, and I can't talk with someone if they tell me they're represented by counsel. I have to go through their attorneys. None of their attorneys seem to be interested in letting me speak to their clients. So that's where we stand. And then eventually you'll have a lawsuit. With a lawsuit, we get to subpoena folks, and then we take their depositions. But that will be a few months down the line.
What's happening tomorrow with the police commission that you think is gonna bring this to a head?
Tomorrow, as I understand it, the police commission is going to receive a report from the LAPD as to what its findings and investigation shows. So I would expect that the LAPD at 9:30 tomorrow in front of the police commission is going to be talking about this case. They're going to be saying what they have uncovered, so we'll all learn a lot more then. But what I don't think they're going to say is anything about our findings here.
Wait a minute, are we talking about the alleged rape, or are we talking about the injuries and the death of Houston Tippett?
I can't tell you what exactly the LAPD is going to report tomorrow. I know the report is out. I asked for a copy of it. In more than one location, I've been refused. So we're going to have to wait until tomorrow to see what the LAPD says.
So technically, a lawsuit hasn't been filed yet, right? This is just a government claim?
Government claims are the precursors to lawsuits. So you file a governmental claim, you have to wait for 45 days for the claim to be rejected by operation of law, and then you can file a lawsuit.
Rather than going back, again, you said, I don't know what the report is. You've got a pretty good idea, otherwise you wouldn't be holding this news conference. Is this report related to the death of Houston Tippett in that training accident? Or is it looking backwards past that date into what the reasons and motivations might have been up to the point to where the training accident began?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I am sure that part of what they're going to say tomorrow at LAPD is how this tragedy occurred. It just seems logical, but whether they go back in time or not, I don't know.
How can we get a copy of the records request?
I can make copies for you.
Okay. Thank you very
Let me
much.
show you, if you're interested, the videos, and you also get a bit of a feel for Houston, the person.
Will you be able to send us copies of the videos that you're sending, that you're playing?
If you have a flash drive, I can give it to you, or if you give us your emails, we'll see what we can do to get it to you, however we can assist you.
Would your colleague who helped me with the video be able to get a copy of the records request?
She can or I can. So this is, I'm going to stand up and show it to
There's
you.
a cup right behind it.
When I mentioned that they have training, and that training is video, this is an example of that. So this is the bicycle training. Well, Houston's mom had a copy of this. That's Houston right there. You can see how happy he is and friendly, saying hi to folks. Here's other officers. They're riding on the beach.
But you don't have to date for these pieces of video?
Then here's another, that's Houston here. The officers, they would use their cell phones to film everybody. Put a little music to this.
They don't use body cameras when they're doing training like this?
Doesn't look like they used it this day, but sometimes I'm assuming they would. So that looks like Houston tipping with his hands up, and obviously that's going towards Santa Monica Beach up here. Those look like electric bikes, by the way. Based on the size of the tires and how they're pedaling them. That's Houston. And that's one of the other things about this. The LAPD claims there's not a single cell phone to take any pictures, but somebody called 911 with a cell phone that apparently didn't exist. This is in the academy. This is training. This is Houston. He's going through taser training. So when I say,
But that's a map right there, right?
that is a map. And when I say that there are videos of training, it's based on the fact there's videos of training from the past. And I'll play it one more time so you can see it. So there you go.
And to be clear, you said that the LAPD says that this rape investigation does not exist.
LAPD said in response to our request for production of records in a PRA request, either they have no documents, they cannot find documents, or they will not produce documents.
And the training video was provided by his mom?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you implying that it would have been protocol to film the training, or that there must have been these kind of self-filmed videos?
I'm implying both, actually, based on custom and practice. LAPD films its training. It makes sense. You film training of an incident and then you play that film afterwards to help show officers what they should do and how they can improve. Also, I'm saying that LAPD officers filmed with their cell phones. We think about Kobe Bryant, they even filmed incidents of tragedy. So that was LA Sheriff's Department, but it's still law enforcement. It shows we have cell phones. How often do you see videos in the news nowadays of police activity? It's common. We have our cell phones, they have videos, something interesting happens, you film it. And certainly we show 3 different videos where there were cell phones filming at other training incidents. Any other questions?
Do you have any indication as to how many officers were there in the facility at this time? Why you know that there was no supervisor, that type of thing?
I know there were at least 10 to 12 officers there. And the way I know that there was no supervisor is some of those officers have spoken, and then what they said has spread and come back to me.
Is that common, that amount of people common for that type of training, or is that more than usual or less?
I think 12 or so would probably be fairly common. I have been told there was a woman that got injured before him in this training as well, and they kept going even knowing there were some issues.
To be clear, when you're saying another woman was injured, that was at a different training event, or that was
I think
at
it
this
was
specific training?
This training, but earlier on, a female officer.
Injured to what extent? Were paramedics called?
I don't know. I know she had a leg injury, but to the extent. The problem I have, of course, is I can't compel folks to talk to me. The police department can compel folks to talk to them because they're employees. Now, interestingly, there should be an internal affairs investigation here, but I've been told internal affairs do not investigate this. It did get investigated by Cal OSHA. The coroner's office did some kind of investigation. There's a lot of holes that we have not seen filled yet on this case.
Is this an addendum to a previous claim, or is this the first time the claim has been filed?
That's the supplement.
Okay.
And
When
that's
was the claim filed?
original, probably June or July. And so this supplement brings up the issues of whistleblower retaliation, it brings up destruction of evidence, and it brings up the allegations of wrongdoing based on the claims of rape.
Why wrongful death if you're really kind of, saying that this was intentional?
Wrongful death is what we do in a civil context. I would like to see the authorities investigating this criminally. I think they should. I think now we are raising items that they should be looking at. But I don't control the Attorney General and I don't control the district attorney. I'm just a lawyer. I'm just a citizen like the rest of you. I will uncover facts, I'll uncover evidence, and I can take depositions when the time is right to help to prove these things. But I cannot engage in a criminal prosecution.
You say the coroner's report was also covering things up. Is the Lucas device discrepancy the only evidence there, or do you have other things?
Well, the coroner's report does not seem to explain all of the injuries. It talks about a Lucas device being utilized, yet we have indications that the Lucas device was never deployed. So that is sloppiness or cover-up. It doesn't explain how all these different head injuries were received, nor even what all the head injuries were, as far as I could tell. I'm not a doctor.
Is there any documentation that this training was supposed to take place in this manner at that facility? I mean, usually when there's a training set up, there's some sort of documentation of who's going to be there, who's participating.
There should be documentation on it. As I understood it, initially the training was going to be at one place and it got moved. But I don't think that's anything other than trying to schedule something, as far as I can tell. But it was going to be at one location at the academy and then went to another location in the academy and stuff. What I've learned. Any other questions?
Just a copy of the